Roughly half the rooms in the average American home never see natural daylight, a critical oversight that can impact everything from your mood to your sleeping cycle. Yet there is a system that can flood any one of those rooms with full-spectrum sunlight at roughly 60 to 80% less than the cost of a traditional skylight, and with no view, no breeze, and no opening to the sky. Under independent testing, this same system reduced lighting energy use in a windowless room by up to 69%. This is a sun tunnel, yet over 60% of Americans have no idea they even exist. Over the next few minutes, I'll show you why these are a worthy addition in any self-sufficient setup, and yet despite their proven record, there's still a little-known technology in modern construction. The problem of bringing daylight into the interior of a building is a dilemma that has plagued builders across every era of human civilization. Roughly 3,500 years ago, the Egyptians cut narrow vertical slits high into the stone walls of the hypostyle hall at Karnak, clerestory windows engineered to throw daylight onto specific columns at specific times of day. In the 2nd century, the architects of the Roman Pantheon left a single 30-foot opening at the apex of its dome, which served as both light source and sundial, tracking the sun across the interior frescoes through the year. But for the next 2,000 years, our answer to bringing sunlight into a building remained the same answer the Romans had landed on: cut a hole in the roof and live with the consequences. Skylights leaked at the edges, lost heat in winter, and delivered unwanted heat gain in the summer. By the late 20th century, the basic geometry of the skylight had not changed in any meaningful way. It was still just a hole in the roof with glass over it. But in 1986, an Australian inventor named Steve Sutton built the first working prototype of a device that would challenge the traditional model. Rather than cutting a large opening directly above the room you wanted to illuminate, Sutton proposed a small, clear dome on the roof, connected to a polished reflective tube, terminating in a frosted diffuser at ceiling level. Sutton's creation was a simple but extremely effective design. For starters, the use of a dome fundamentally changed the mechanism of harnessing the sunlight. A flat skylight at the early hours of the day catches almost nothing, but when the sun hits the dome at an angle of just 15 or 20 degrees, it channels that low-angle light downward. Below the dome, the light enters a polished tube. The interior surface of a premium tube is coated with a material called Spectralite Infinity, which reflects 99.7% of visible light at every bounce. Budget tubes often just use aluminum, which reflects just 95%. And that difference sounds trivial, but it's not. A typical residential installation requires the light to bounce roughly 10 times on its way from the roof to the ceiling. After 10 bounces, at 99.7% reflectivity, 97% of the original light remains, having lost less energy than it would crossing a single pane of double-glazed glass. But after 10 bounces at 95%, only 60% remains in these budget models. That's a noticeable 40% difference in the delivered light inside the room. But the truly elegant feature of the system is its ability to transmit visible light while rejecting heat. The same reflective coating that bounces the visible spectrum is engineered to absorb infrared, the wavelengths that carry heat. With each reflection, more than half of the remaining infrared energy is absorbed by the tube wall and dissipated into the attic. By the time the light reaches the diffuser, it has been stripped of its heat, and thus the room receives sunlight without solar gain. And at the bottom of the tube, the diffuser, a frosted lens or prismatic panel, scatters that beam evenly across the room. The result is a ceiling fixture that looks and behaves like an electric panel light, but is in fact a column of unfiltered sunlight. By 1990, Sutton had founded Solitube in Sydney to manufacture the device commercially. By 1992, it had reached North America, and in the decades since then, numerous research papers and real-world studies have proven their benefits over more traditional lighting systems. In a controlled study by Lawrence Berkeley, researchers concluded that 14-inch tubes reduced annual lighting energy by 22 to 32%, while the 22-inch tubes reduced it by 27 to 69%. And in a real-world case, a national grocery chain installed 164 Solitube tubes across a 43,000-square-foot supermarket in Chino Hills, California, and found that during peak daylight hours, the tubes provide nearly all of the building's interior illumination. While the payback period of a $600 sun tunnel runs somewhere between 5 to 10 years, the benefits of these seem to far exceed the cost and convenience of not having to change a light bulb. Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto installed tubular daylighting systems in patient recovery wards on the basis of clinical research showing that exposure to natural daylight stabilizes circadian rhythms and shortens hospital stays. More than 1,800 tubes are now installed in medical facilities across 40 countries. And compared to the heat gain of traditional skylights, not only do they run 60 to 80% cheaper to buy and install, they also have a lower solar heat gain coefficient of 0.2 compared to a skylight's average of 0.3 to 0.5, meaning lower levels of unwanted heat loss or gain. The benefits of sun tunnels are well documented, and there has been a notable adoption of this tech in the United States. Right now, there are estimated to be between 2 and 2.8 million of them already installed in the country. They've even been recognized in state building codes. California offers an explicit Title 24 exemption that favors them over conventional skylights. And a handful of states, including Florida, California, and Arizona, have passed solar rights laws that classify these devices as protected solar energy systems and override most local restrictions. Yet despite this, sun tunnels have never become a default feature of American home construction. And the reason has nothing to do with the technology itself, but rather is most likely due to a handful of practical barriers. The first is awareness. Industry surveys consistently find that more than 60% of American consumers are unfamiliar with what a tubular daylighting device is, what it does, or how it is meaningfully different from a skylight. The product is not advertised in the way that window upgrades or skylights are. Instead, it lives in the catalogs of specialty contractors and the back aisles of building supply stores, found mostly by people who already went looking for it. The second is upfront cost. Even at 60 to 80% cheaper than a traditional skylight, a professionally installed tubular daylighting device runs $600 to $1,300 per unit. Compared to the alternative, leaving the electric light on, the payback is real but not immediate. Most homeowners replacing a roof or remodeling a bathroom are working from a fixed budget, and a hole in the roof for a room they already light electrically is rarely the first item on the list. And the third, and likely the largest barrier of all, is the fundamental hesitancy most homeowners feel about cutting a hole in their roof. And the fear is not unreasonable. A poorly installed tube will leak. A tube installed in an uninsulated attic in a humid climate will produce condensation that drips from the ceiling diffuser and looks identical to a roof leak. The product has to be installed correctly by someone who understands flashing and attic ventilation, or it will create exactly the problem it was supposed to avoid. So, while there's certainly some practical barriers and planning required to make the most of a sun tunnel system, for those willing to navigate these issues, then, integrating them into your self-sufficient setup is one of the easiest and most passive lighting systems you can use. The first thing to be honest about is what a tubular daylighting device is for. It is not a replacement for a window. It offers no view of the outdoors, does not open, and does not bring in fresh air. What it does is deliver high-quality natural daylight into rooms that cannot get it any other way. If you are picking between a window and a tube for the same wall, choose the window. If you are picking between a tube and a 100-watt incandescent bulb running 10 hours a day in a windowless laundry room, the tube is the right answer. A 10-inch tube illuminates up to 150 square feet, appropriate for a hallway, a walk-in closet, or a small bathroom. A 14-inch tube covers 200 to 300 square feet, places like a kitchen, a bedroom, or a laundry room. An 18-inch tube covers 350 to 500 square feet, like a great room or open-plan living area. The rule of thumb the industry uses is that a 14-inch tube delivers roughly the equivalent of 5 100-watt incandescent bulbs at midday, which most people find more than sufficient for a windowless interior space. But always remember that position matters as much as size. In the Northern Hemisphere, a tube installed on a south-facing roof slope will collect significantly more daylight than one on a north-facing slope, particularly through the winter months, when the sun tracks low across the southern sky. East and west-facing slopes will deliver strong morning and afternoon light respectively, but lose the midday peak. Where a south-facing slope is available and unobstructed by trees or neighboring roofs, that is where the tube belongs. Costs are split into 3 tiers. A do-it-yourself installation kit runs $300 to $900 all in, assuming you already own a circular saw and a good caulk gun. Professional installation on a standard asphalt shingle roof runs $600 to $1,300 per unit, including parts, labor, and flashing. Specialty roofs like clay tile, standing seam metal, or slate will likely run more expensive. In every case, the installation is dramatically cheaper than the $1,600 to $4,200 a comparable traditional skylight will cost. But practical limits should also be considered before installing a sun tunnel. The most important is run length. A 10-inch tube should not exceed 20 feet of total length between roof and ceiling, and a 14-inch tube should not exceed 30 feet, or the cumulative reflective losses begin to bite. The second is the path. The tube needs a relatively clear vertical run from roof to ceiling, navigating around any HVAC ducting, electrical lines, or structural framing in the attic. Each 90-degree elbow in the tube costs a measurable amount of light. If your attic is dense, the system gets less effective. The sun tunnel is a 40-year-old refinement of a 5,000-year-old problem that humans need natural daylight, that the rooms we spend our lives in are mostly not on the perimeter of our buildings, and that a polished metal tube can carry the sun into rooms that windows will never reach. If you enjoyed this story, then I think you'll like many of the other videos we have on our channel. Make sure to subscribe to discover the latest solutions to living a self-sufficient life.